second because we're about to go live. Then I guess I'm going to push the share button. I think it's no. I'm just sharing my screen. I think it's automated. Okay, so what go live though is at the 11 o'clock thing, right? 11:59.
Cool. Yep.
Hi, share. This is the YouTube software. I hope everyone's able to see this. We're now starting the first time that I think we might be one of the first people to use this. I mean, I don't know exactly how many people are using this, but we're now switching from Google Hangouts to Minds. And Minds has got some software partnership with Jitsi. Jitsi does video software that's open source. And we're teaching you at least how to do it in theory. Go to our Minds link, which is Minds Exertis Tartary Nova, and that's our group. And you have a gathering, and you can click on the video share and gathering. And it comes this with a microphone you can turn on, and a camera you can turn off, and buttons for live streaming, which you then put in your code, and your code you can get from your YouTube page, and you can take your video software and you can run it through. And then over here is your screen share. When you click on that, it starts sharing your screen, and then people can see your video or your camera or your whatever text or whatever you want. You just switch it with that. So
awesome.
Here you go. We made it. We made it to season 2. How's it going, Odin's son? How's it going, Mike?
Hey, what's up, Exertis? What's up, Mikey? It's Odin's son. How you doing?
And then Mike, what's up with you, man? Like, you've got all kinds of important stuff going on. What are you looking at right now?
Always.
Star Force all day.
Always Star Force, man.
Well,
Star Force.
Show me some of what you've got in terms of Star Force in Rome. Is that what you're looking at right now?
Yeah, I just located this one. Quite obvious, actually, but missed it the first time around.
How many Star Force have you seen in this area? Like, what's the main? Okay, pulling out a bit. Yeah.
So every star.
And they're all spreading around from the center point and the center citadel.
Yeah, this is Vatican, which you can see here. Bastion points. You're not sharing your screen anymore, or my screen.
No, I am. I think we're sharing your screen actually directly. I was just going to the chat wall on YouTube so I could tell them we love Minds. I'm not sure how we feel about YouTube because this video has already been demonetized. I think just because we're using Minds, and I don't know, in general, I think it's insane. But we've got plenty of alternatives too. So don't you worry. I think what we're going to start doing is posting all these things on Minds TV, and that's going to be a lot more useful. Because they're open source free software, so we can walk as we please where we want to, and I think that's a better deal. So this is Rome. This is insane.
That whole red outline are the walls of Rome.
I want to start doing some printing these out and drawing from the center from particular points, maybe where that water source is, where the river goes around, the outwards lines, and see how many points there are in the star. Because I think we could probably recreate some of these old lost stars and
Wouldn't it be easier to start with something like a little bit more organized, like Palmanova?
Right. Wow. That looks like Star Wars stuff, really.
It really does. And it looks like the umbrella from Resident Evil.
Oh, right, totally. I wasn't sure if you're going there, but I was like, yeah, I think so.
Fractal.
No, I think that's an important. It's an important thing to do, man. Like the Umbrella Corporation is pretty real. I think there's a lot going on with some of the anime and the video games in general. Have some secrets that they're trying to hide. Umbrella Corporation is right in your face, though. Same with Gundam. I think Gundam mentions the 5 families that run everything, which is pretty hilarious. They put we don't really know what happened before the fall of the internet, but the Rockafordians that run everything. It's okay, set up from the beginning. You actually were mentioning you were going to talk a little bit about you saw a movie recently. I saw the first one,
Yeah,
which is based on a book, John Wick.
definitely. Yeah, so John Wick 3 just came out, and if you guys don't mind, I do like a little spoiler. You
Yeah,
can start doing like the introduction to the whole premise of the movie, and then like I can show some photos and then get into like my favorite Tartar part, and I think you'll find it really cool if you want to do that.
for sure. Yeah, if you feel, yeah, we'll take a moment. I mean, in general, what I found interesting when you mentioned it was like I remember right around the time was this kid from Castroville who was living Castroville is not Castro Street. It's like a artichoke part of California. It's like the original #1 artichokes in the world part of California. And we had a guy who was a great programmer, and there's actually videos of him on YouTube teaching people how to do like action script flash animations back in like 2004. And then he goes crazy and he wakes up in a car with a gas mask on after the Aurora Batman movie shooting, which was like a big thing.
Right.
And he ended up being implicated and arrested and everything. And everything sat kind of in a weird mode. And it was like, well, what happened in that? Well, in that, apparently a bunch of innocent people got murdered, right? And like the
Right.
worst
I
part
remember that.
was some of them were like actually soldiers. Like some of these were decent human beings, probably, and the others were associated with like. So when Chelsea Manning walked around with Wikipedia, WikiLeaks like released a video that she had gotten or they had gotten through leaving the military base with a DVD marked "Enter the Sandstorm" Metallica. So they thought it was a Metallica CD, and they
Right.
just left off. And all of the footage showed, digging graves with machine guns out of helicopters for people that were already were alive still, basically, like instantaneous, intense stuff. That was really kind of some of the first pivoting moments for like Julian Assange and like when WikiLeaks was getting kind of all the press. So people were really like, what's going on with that? And then there's like 4 of these people that were involved with that, including the guy who's watching it out for the base that Chelsea Manning was at, were in the movie theater and died. And about 2 or 3 of them weren't. And so it was like, okay, probably not, but there sounds like a pattern to that. There's some random, anyway, there's a movie that came out right around that same time, Tom Cruise, from the church, and it's all about John Wick. And John Wick is a assassin. He shows up at a random town and he has nothing with him. He goes into a Goodwill and he buys a hat and a new blank t-shirt, a new jacket, a new pair of jeans. And he starts over every town he goes. And he doesn't have anything with him ever because he has no baggage. But he knows what's going on, and there was a moment when somebody, some random shooting happens in America, and he knows that there's a pattern to it. It's not just random because he's seen that kind of work before, and so it becomes like this chase to look down for people that have been through this already. And that's just the first one. So, I mean, like a lot of crazy stuff. I don't want to do too much of a spoiler for that, but just that the point is they find that the people that were shot were several people that were associated with each other and 2 randoms to make it look clean. And then somebody innocent was blamed with it who just seemed irrational and crazy. So, that tends to be a pattern more and more that at least in movies. And
yeah, and I feel like that's like programming too, like Project Paperclip. People not realizing what the government is like installing in them, or sometimes like you'll find yourself just blasting away, or you'll be on TV. It's pretty scary, But with John Wick, it's pretty cool. In the second and third one, they get into some more interesting like Matrix type of like fighting scenes, and like these tunnel connections and alternative currency, and almost like a religious undertone. And so I wanted to show some pictures from the third one, and I'll kind of tell you about the scene that I feel is the most Tartar, and why you should definitely check it out if you haven't already. So do you want me to switch over?
Yeah, let me select it. Can you still hear me? Because I think things are getting kind of frozen on Mike's end.
Yeah, I can definitely hear you. I can't hear
Okay.
Mike if he's talking.
1 second. Let me just. I'm trying. This is all new software for us. So give me just a second. Gatherings. Things are just. This is the first time, so we haven't quite gotten this completely bug free.
You guys pause on me.
Andrea,
Are we back?
We get Mike back with that? That work?
Yeah, he's here.
yeah, man. I just had to go make some light, go to the toilet, get a drink, and
Oh, okay, yeah. I thought there was a technomancer that was trying to take out the system, man. You scared me. Just next one, man.
no.
All right, let me. I'm gonna open a new Chrome tab, and that way, let me start back over.
So, just
moving
on a
to
side
Odin's
note,
then.
some of our viewers are talking in the chat, and they saying, "What's up? What's up, guys?
Hey, what's up, guys?
What's up, Emmanuel?"
Let me see the chat stream also. Let's see. Hey, wow, we got Brett, we got Kyle, we got Texan Paving, Eugenie, Randy, Emmanuel, Scaris, all you guys. Glad you're here. Willie from Belgium, and Gregory Olympus. Glad you guys are listening. Yeah, connectivity problems, man. I mean, Spain is still what it is, but we're really close. And we have both streams are running at the same time. What does that mean, Maggot? Can you rephrase that so we understand better? Are there two separate videos that are available right now, or what's happening with that?
No, we're back. We're good. We're good now. I think we have a better connection.
All right, so Odin, why don't you click on your screen share and then go for
Absolutely.
it.
Oh, looks like we got.
All right.
So help me out, right? Because it's new anyways. Where do I get this YouTube live stream, or do I just open a separate browser with the YouTube chat?
It's in the gatherings right here, the YouTube live stream. It's youtube.bay for baby and XM3i6 or 31616/AU for gold and 8. You see that right there?
Am I sharing, guys?
Yeah, your John Wick's all over the screen.
All day, John Wick, baby. Yeah, you guys definitely have to check this out. It is definitely a very Tartar movie. So we find, let me just find the right photo, guys. Photo. That's a UAP joke if you don't know so. 1 second. All right, so here we go. So John Wick 3 is all about religious undertones, and here we are in a library, and John Wick has to go and get his ticket. And what you find is he goes up to the librarian, and I don't have a photo of that, nor do we care, right, guys? And he goes to the library, and he says, I need to go to section 2. I need to get in to Alexandra Rusakov. And he walks in, and he opens up the book, and it shows a religious saint that's a giant. And when he does that, this guy comes around the corner, and he's a giant. He's in the Tartar section. They have an awesome fight. That's not really all that happens. He gets these rosaries, right? And when he gets these rosary beads, he heads to the opera house, which is a Russian opera house. And when you see him walk in, he has to strip down. He's with all the gangsters, and you see a play going on. And obviously, it's an orphan. It's an orphan girl. She's Russian, and she's in front of her madame, and she's giving her instructions and just kind of beating her to the ground. So what you're seeing there is obviously after the last reset, you had these orphan children that either came out of these tunnels, that were in these foundling homes, and people were buying them up. gangs were buying them up, controllers, and they were making them do their deeds. If it's not like Peaky Blinders where they have kids running around being gangsters, it's kind of like you're cleaning out mud. But this has a connection to Tartary because of not only the Russian theme, but John Wick comes here and he needs his ticket because he is excommunicado. So he's excommunicated. He has an hour. His friend gave him an hour. He's on the run. And he goes to that library. He has that fight scene. And when he goes in front of his madame, like he says, I have my ticket. And she goes, why have you come home? Jordania Jovanovic. He goes, I am a child of Belarus. You are bound and I am owed. He gets branded right after that with an upside down cross because he's asking for passage. But he is telling you right there that he is a part of the tribe of Belarus. He's part of one of the 13 tribes of the lost, Israel, right? And because we know that Israel was really in Russia. And, we're putting all these connections together. And when we do that, they put it all for you in these videos because of either collective consciousness or everybody is just kind of waking up at the same time or, the controllers and the people that are in the movie industry, they want you to know at this point. And that is my feeling. And not just mine, many others. But sorry about that, guys. 1 second. I'm on the wrong page. But, not just that, he has to go to get passage over into Europe and into the Middle East. And he has another fight scene. But what he does is he goes and he finds almost like a Moses caravan. And he's stranded. He has to walk until he's pretty much dead. And he doesn't have any water, nothing. And he finds this Moses figure. And that is pretty much of the high table. And the high table in the movie is kind of like the Illuminati. And not only that, but he has to cut off his own finger and give a sacrifice. So in these movies, you usually see sacrifices that are made and bound and owed to, these Illuminati figures. And, with the whole Christ consciousness and the 13 tribes and Tartary, this movie has all of that in it. And if it doesn't have that, then it has something to do with, the king of bums, kind of like what you see in Silver Lake. And Exertus, you remember that movie? We talked a little bit about that, where in California they have to he has to go and rub John Wayne's head, and he meets the king of bums, and he leads them to the tunnels. So why I think you guys should see this is because you're seeing what the movie industry wants you to see as what is left of Tartaria. And I find that so great because we're at this time period where it is all coming together. We're doing it in the videos. We're doing it, in the live streams. And it's just really exciting to me because in John Wick 3, you see this kind of like a Christ figure. He has the long hair. He's battling all of these, monsters or, these phantoms. And, he's doing it almost to the death, but he's not dying. It's kind of like the Matrix where, you have to plug in to play and you have to experience it. We are obviously, in a bunch of different dimensions. And I feel that it's showing that in this movie. It's almost like it's saying that life is a game to me. And what do you guys think about that?
I'm just stoked that you weren't upset at me for like spieling for 20 seconds or minutes about Jack Reacher and you didn't correct me that I was talking about the wrong movie.
I know. I didn't want to be rude because we're on live stream.
All right,
but
guys.
that's your boy. Yeah,
I mixed up the movie about the guy who gets his dog killed with the guy who gets his family killed. But it's still an important. I'm sorry, because like now my mind spun the entire completely different direction. I was thinking about Jack Reacher. John Wick is so much different, but it's actually really important because only in these Keanu Reeves movies. I was just thinking about Johnny Mnemonic, right?
Yeah.
And so Johnny Mnemonic, he's a courier, and if you haven't seen John Wick, Johnny Mnemonic, I think, is kind of weirdly similar. It's like it's not quite saying it's the same movie, but it's like this guy who was a techno courier for all these crazy corporations, and he's an assassin, and his mind is like super. I mean, he's at least dedicated to martial arts and everything else. When the mob scene goes down, he ends up cleaning up the mob scene. So very different movie, but it's a very, really, really important movie. So, I mean, thinking about the tunnels, though, you have to wonder, like, what are really in the tunnels.
Let's see if we can find that guy while we're live. Go on.
Yeah. Well, all right, tunnels, let's type that word in and see, like, some of the moments. But, I mean, if you start looking into, like, some of these tunnels that exist and, like, the way caverns, like, so where we were at recently, I mean, I was just at this spot recently, the Almeria Castle water. That's right. So this spot I was just at, we just did a video over there recently. It's the last of the hangouts before the gatherings. Now we're using gatherings. But there's all these water places, and the water runs from the center. There's a castle.
Are you live streaming? I mean, are you screen sharing now? Yeah.
Yeah, can you see that?
All right. Yeah, I wanted to make sure because I was trying to get off of what I was on.
Good point. It looks like I'm not. Now I am. That's right. Okay. So here's the castle. You guys can see the pictures. These are the walls of the building, but all around it there's water that flows from the top of it. So the water comes from the center and goes up to the top. So we've been talking a lot about vortices and how water works and how you get mineral water, to rise in the center of a building, and like also Archimedean spirals and pumping. But the water, the way it flows down from the center. So this area for 5 years could succeed against a siege that kept all the water and food out of it, which if you imagine is mind-boggling in a sense. Like, how do they survive without food and water? Well, they had to produce it themselves in this really small top of a mountain, but they had enough water to feed thousands of people that could fight for them and feed their animals. So, I mean, it's pretty crazy. And now there's a crazy waterslide park there. So I'm starting to notice that also. There's just so many waterslide parks that are built, and that was something we were joking about, but it's pretty interesting to me. So, all right, when we're talking about tunnels, we're seeing that there was Tartarian tunnels, basically, like Ohio tunnels. It's an example. There's all these crazy tunnels in the middle of the country that are out in the middle of nowhere. And what do they have? They have, the half-dome shapes. They're buried under mud. And they're supposed to be built recently, but they're all disappeared, right? And like, this is like, okay, so what? This was for a train, or like what? When did this happen? Why are all the trains the same size as Roman roads? This is the exact size of a Roman road. That's a freaking unbelievable anomaly that they would use the exact same systems, even though, like, why wouldn't you want to have a larger system? Because you're talking about trains and things like that. So
that tunnel was a tunnel in Clinton. If you go back.
Really?
Yeah, it's awesome. Right up there. No, next one over. 2 over. It looks just like it to the left.
That one maybe, or too far.
It's okay. Go on.
There are. That's an interesting thing. Also, like Clinton, you can also pull up any of this stuff. Massachusetts. I can't actually spell this. Actually, this is really embarrassing. How do I do that? Massachusetts. Yeah. Okay. Just making sure.
You can just write MASS.
I didn't have any. I could have spelled it, but I didn't have any faith in myself at all. It was really sad.
It's okay.
Right.
We believe in you.
Don't. Always test every theory. Make sure that you get the truth. So here's a crazy place, and this is actually where Odinson's at, and all of this place. I mean, like, it's just crazy. These Roman buildings that are built down below this mud flood region, and then this crazy wall that looks like it was there to hold it back, and then it was dug out or something. I mean, Clinton, Massachusetts is a very fancy place for the 1800s. I mean, it's the newest place in the steampunk era, but there's just all of this crazy stuff that's like Roman. And now we're seeing, spray painted, but don't miss the point. Like these areas are really fancy designs, and then you start looking at some of the original pictures, and this original picture is not of the building of it. It's like it's like they've removed a bunch of material,
Right, because it looks like there was fortification on the river, and you find that if you go down there, they have stones that are almost like, what you would see around a volcano. Like they have like plasma, hits on them. And when you dive into the archives on Clinton, I suggest anybody do so, you'll see a bunch of walls that are just smashed. And it looks to us like we, presented a few videos back, like this was the remains from the reset. And the pictures that you find in the archives, some of them are like the first glimpses the controllers have of Clinton, Massachusetts. So not only do you see that, but you see like free energy trains and trolleys. You have these Russian style buildings and almost like what you would call like Roman, but we know are Tartarian. They're all red brick, and it just really is amazing. Plus, I have a Russian museum. I showed some photos from that a few videos back. If anybody wants to check that out, what's the name of the video?
That's a great question. I think it's called Boston. It's something about Clinton Red Sox.
Yeah, exactly.
Tartary Red Sox. I don't know. I'm going to start putting numbers on all the videos. I think that's what I might start doing. Just literally numbering them, because then it'll be easier to find them. Because the titles are crazy. I'm sorry. It's dawning on me. So it caught me. Oh, but yeah, there's a picture of Red Sox, like Boston Red Sox. You'll notice it.
Right. And not only that, in the river, you have this backstory they like to, display of, them having to flood these towns for the dam. But it looks more like it was already flooded the towns from the reset after 1812. And then they fixed the dam to save the rest of Clinton and Leominster, which are all red brick industry buildings that had communicated.
Right. So this is the white stone. This is the wall. This is holding back the the mud around it. This is a dugout. And then if you start seeing Clinton, there's a lot of red brick, and the red brick is the older. And that's what's a trip about it. But then you also brought up volcanoes. So yes. I want to talk a bit about volcanoes because there's so much we could go over. We should. The thing is, so many people have been having issues with them recently because people are saying, okay, well, they're not real. And I'll tell you, I can see where you're coming from, up to the point where if you start saying that there aren't articles on the Earth or whatever it's called, that's blasting thermal vents. And I get that there are craters that are separate. Like there are craters that are separate, and then there are mounds and things like that. But volcanoes themselves, like I have been witness in South America to dozens of volcanoes. I escaped volcanoes. I went down a volcano in a sled once. I mean, I've been on volcano. I'm gonna do it. Hold on.
There's two things to say here before we go on, right?
Yeah.
The last video that you posted of the hangout with all the boys, right?
Mm-hmm.
Lee jumped in there and he talked about how he feels that it's the Earth representing the Taurus field. Mm-hmm. And I connected with that instantly because, I come from a cosmology. Yes. And that, and where they brought up Antarctica and the giant spiders, and having to do around possibly, big mountains that are magnetic or volcanoes that, they're eating that volcanic, debris, and they're getting so big. And, that's where we see a lot of giant creatures, right?
Right.
So,
well, so I was going to mention, when I was at, I've been at about 24 or more volcanoes eruptions in South America. One time I escaped in a car. One time I escaped in a sled. The weirdest time was in the sled and this wasn't as bad actually as the car. Because the car, we were racing alongside burning forest from an actual eruption. But what happened here was I got down the sled about a day before the actual eruption. But when we got up there, no one was admitting it as how smoky the volcano was becoming. Because the volcano had actually been dormant or something for a while, and it was getting ready to go. And you could see smoke coming out of it, and no one wanted to talk about it. It was super obvious, and I could smell it. And they're like, oh, yeah, no, it's been around, and it hasn't erupted since 1970 something. I was like, okay, great. So we get to the top, and then we end up going down this thing on a sled with these pickaxes that can hold us back. And it was after that I realized, and just today I was in a taxi with a guy, and I listened to his music, and I knew exactly he was not from Spain. Because that's no music Spaniards listen to. I was like, ¿Dónde sos? Where are you actually from? He's like, oh, Ecuador. I'm like, yeah, awesome. Yeah. Love Ecuador. we're just making a video. We're gonna talk about volcanoes, and it's just like, oh man, dude, because where I'm from, con frecuencia, with frequency, like all the time, volcanoes are going off like regular.
So
yeah, regularmente. Yeah, but like the difference is that that's also where all these mining centers are, and so it's very interesting when you start finding out about mining and about the quarries and what's going on inside some of these holes. Because look at this, it's a giant sand pile that people are climbing on top of with rocks melting, and there's a lot of different materials inside of here, and so it makes plenty of sense. I mean, everything from silicon tree research has a place in here.
That's like one of my favorite topics.
Yeah, and I think that's something people should know about. Obviously, if you haven't heard about silicon trees, spelling too fast with my.
Even if you don't like the whole like no trees on flat Earth, you should definitely check this out.
Well, what you could say is like I've always been, even before I ever heard anything controversial. Like I always assumed this was like maybe assisted by mushrooms, right?
Oh, because, like, I was just gonna say mushrooms, dude. We're best friends right now.
Yeah, I know, totally. I mean, this is a very practical thing. You start seeing like harmonic resonance patterns and how minerals are being milked basically, but like dairy production by mushrooms, and they're putting together this like this is how dirt is literally formed. There's no dirt without dirt printed by mushrooms. Dirt is printed.
Right. Mycelium.
You could use a dirtier word, but it's printed. So they have different materials that they can produce, and then they allow for different kinds of life. When you think about plants, the plants grow out of mushroom piles, right? Like you get all these plants out of the mushroom pile. But that's because they produce all the minerals, and they share all the minerals with this other stuff, which has different DNA than it. Because plants don't have cell walls. So they're penetrated, and then they're producing oxygen, which they can grow. So they're farming by producing all this oxygen. And so it started making more and more sense to me how there might be different kinds of life that are controlled by mushrooms, that mushrooms actually understand how to farm.
Have you ever seen the movie John Carter?
John Connor.
Yeah, John Carter. He the man that goes to the Mars. Right. Well, there's this great scene where he's with the
you want to jump on your
Well, no. I don't have a photo of it. If you just want to like scan like that,
John Carter is an interesting thing because it's an 1800s comic book. It's a comic book from the 1800s.
Yeah, it is, and he goes through Stargate that's in one of the silicon based like trees, right? And he goes to another dimension where he meets these giant tribal figures that are kind of like the Tartarians of the movie, right? But they make them look all funky with like 4 arms, and I don't think they have 2 rows of teeth, but they could. But anyways, right? The cool part is that there's blue bloods, and he is on a different magnetic field, right? So his bones are less dense there or more dense. I don't remember that part, but he's able to jump like really far and do these great fight scenes. But there's this one perfect scene where him and the princess, they go into where the waters used to be, kind of like the Grand Canyon. And there is this mushroom structure that they go in, and it has all of those cell structures that you were just talking about, and they are able to touch them and see like all of the galaxy or all of how to route your dimensions to go over like the Rainbow Bridge to connect the 9 dimensions, kind of like in the Nordic mythology. And like when we talk about Tartaria, we talk about almost like a one world religion. And I feel people get confused on that. We could touch on that at some different time. But with this movie, John Carter, he basically starts in the 1800s, lands in another dimension. You can call it Mars. You can say, it's not, if you don't believe in the whole like space theory, but he's definitely in a different dimension by going into one of these silicon trees. Right?
I really want to start touching on that actually, is the idea of different spaces and how they relate to the idea of like a mental space and psychological spaces.
Right? Bigger in the TARDIS than out of the TARDIS, right?
And even if you start thinking about luminaries being these blasting light data patterns that are blasting data to different spots, then you have electrostatic holding them up in the firmament, and they're bringing down data from different realms, when these realms are personalities essentially, and that might be an actual artificial intelligence that is data. And so
Yes.
these systems might be that, like Mars is referred to as the grandson of Saturn, the son of Jupiter. And so there could be something more to the personalities of these storms, like we say Hurricane Katrina or whatever. Like there might be something of that we're starting to see more and more.
Right.
One of the movies. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say like a mini reset kind of type of idea. Or, you're right. Okay.
Well, so you start thinking about the spirituality of like some of these movie making people will use like Kabbalah to make these movies. So like one of the movies I was thinking about was Joe versus the Volcano. So Joe versus the Volcano is a movie. It's like the third movie with Meg Ryan and Tom Hanks. There's like You've Got Mail, and there's Seattle, Sleepless in Seattle. But the one, there's actually, I'm sure there's more. I can't go into it as far as I want, but Joe versus the Volcano is interesting because it's about a man who's tricked into believing he's going to die in 6 months. So then a guy comes around and says, your life is miserable. You don't have anybody. You got to spend your life as best you can. Well, I need someone to jump into the volcano for boobarium or boobaroo or something, which is an element. Right. I can't get more than 1 gram of stuff off the planet, but I need it so that I can build my semicapacitors and superconductors. This is the best stuff for superconductors. And so he has to get this guy credit cards. And he's like, go spend as much money as you want at Armani, get a taxi to a boat, and then you're going to go with my daughter. So he meets 3 different women that are played by Meg Ryan. And so Meg Ryan is, the girl that he meets at the place he quits, where he's like, oh gosh, these luminary lights are terrible. And then he's the daughter of the man. And then Meg Ryan's, the daughter of the guy.
You're seeing like kind of like clones of or different personas of the same person.
Yeah, it's like he's finding Meg Ryan's over the world in different ways, and like no matter what he
kind of like plasma, like kind of like reproducing that person, or what is it supposed to like?
What I was gonna say is like the Gemetrix. Let me see. So what I found that was kind of funny is you do the Gemetrix and you type in either Meg Ryan or Meg R.I. and you get, because you get rid of the, the vowels. You get name, Ray, you get glory, intuition, existence, Christ the Lord, the bloodlines. There's all kinds of interesting things you can find there. I've been using vowels recently, and I found interesting stuff too. Oculus and Colony, National Socialism, Church of Philadelphia, San Francisco, cannabis and music. I don't know. I've been finding when you use vowels, you get a kind of a weather pattern versus like the sign of the times, right? And you can even, if you don't want to use the Y, but sometimes the Y is useful too because it's like J. So, but if you see Sasquatch, I think it's kind of interesting. And then if you look up, Tom Hanks, you get I'm the Same, King of Kings, North Beginners, Hanukkah, Francesca, Thorn, Gatekeeper. So Tom Hanks is pretty interesting as a gatekeeper. Epiphanies. So there's some stuff.
It's his connection to CERN, right? Like, like CERN and what we talked about, Mandela effects, and then not only that, then that. So cool.
So there's some pretty gnarly stuff in there, and what I've noticed, one of the main scenes I liked, and I'll go back to it, but there's a scene where he's standing on a boat after he's lost everything, but he's got the moon rising over him, and he's like, oh God, whose name I do not know, thank you for the gift of life. I never realized how big. And you think about Big, which is the movie where he sells the soul as a 13-year-old boy at his bar mitzvah so that he can be a man at the age of 33, which is just a fascinating movie in
Masonic number, right?
But there's also absolutely, and he's also in a movie called, he's a TV series called Bosom Buddies, right? I don't know if you've seen that, but there's actually the first thing that he really does is Bosom Buddies. And that was where Tom Hanks and his friend were drag queens so that they could live in a female-only building. It's a very strange show. I saw it once in Argentina. I had to watch it just to know what was
I think I've seen that actually.
3 seasons of this exists. Let's put it that way. It's a really no, I didn't quite get there. But I feel like someday someone's gonna make me. So I don't know. But what I was gonna say is I did see Hologram for the King. And Hologram for the King, which is David Eggers' book that they made into a movie. Yeah, it's a trip. It's like he goes to the Middle East to sell. It starts with a talking head song lip synced by Tom Hanks. And you might find yourself without, how did I get here in this place? Let the days go by. And so he has a prince or a king say, okay, well, I need you to make hologram, like Oculus projection technology for me for our meetings. And he's like, okay, I guess I'll come to Saudi Arabia. But when he gets there, the king's not there. And so what he ends up doing is he's like, well, the heck's, where's the king? And the king's like, oh, he'll be here eventually. And here's where we're going to build the museum. And here's where we're going to build the city. And here's where we're going to have the roads. And this sand dune's going to be where the hospital is. And that
let me say it, though. He's having, there's ghost cities, too, right? They show the ghost cities, kind of like what you see in China. Which is, for the next reset. And so that's, I just want to say, that was my favorite part.
Yeah, it's a trip. He's like, okay, all these cities are already built, and then you're building another one? Why? It's like, well, someday they'll be filled. It's like really a trip. And he's like, okay, but where's the king? And the king's like, king. So it's like Solomon has to build the temple so that the king will show up. And you think about all the movies with Tom Hanks, you start putting them together and seeing like Volunteers, where he's a, Peace Corps agent that's working to help build the bridge because he's the only one who has any reason to. And this movie kind of pulls it all together with like a cross between the Kabbalism and Islam and all of the different things about the desert. So I think there's some trippy stuff in that one. I wanted also to point out something about Wild West. So
I didn't even know
guys
Victor
probably
just joined us. That's pretty cool.
Oh, is Victor? Are you able to? Is it able to work yet? Can you hear it? Can you talk?
He's muted.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah,
hey,
buddy.
Victor.
How's it
What's
going?
up, bro?
So I had to use my girlfriend's computer for it.
Yeah, that's awesome. What kind of computer does she have?
The same as mine.
Oh, okay. Was she using which operating system?
I'm using Chrome right now.
Yeah.
On Mac or Windows?
On Mac.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm
I think
using it on
Linux and stuff. Oh, but you got Windows working? Okay, so that's cool on all systems. All right, great. We'll have to figure out what's going on with your computer, Victor. But at least we got it going. I can't see any screen share. Do you know how to use your screen share yet?
Um.
Bottom left, there's a picture of a computer, and then
Oh yeah, I see.
Okay.
But now I cannot get it up again. I just had it up. Now it won't go up again. That's weird. Wait.
Well, this is the first
Wait, am I
time.
still in it?
Oh yeah, there it is. There it is. I see it.
Okay, there you go.
So I wanted to really quickly go over some stuff because of outer space. So we're talking about the Matrix, and I wanted to also bring up, by the way, the Matrix protocol, which we're probably going to start using. So all of this stuff, we're going to be using the Matrix protocol, which is a system that gets us off of like Facebook and Google. It's a system that's completely free software. And so all of the chats and all of the names, like as you move away from Gmail and Google and AOL, you know what I mean? This is going to be the free software thing. It's like a platform that you can self-generate and you don't need anyone to make it for you. So that's your freedom right there. But there's a movie called The Matrix. I don't know if you've heard of it, but it's kind of famous. And it has John Wick. It has the guy.
Are you about to red pill us right now, bro?
I'm going purple with the blue and yellow purple pills. So
Oh
this
my
is
god!
so
I'm so
here's-
excited.
this is just a real quick thing on the Matrix. The reality you live in is a series of spaces that you observe and experience, and those spaces are inner outer realms of yourself. Those realms have been explored. Morpheus's dream. Anderson, son of man, son of Anders, Ander meaning like Andreas, like and is male, like son of man, and then also Neo being the new son of man with the Trinity, right? The Trinity is like this machine that he's restarted by, and every character goes all the way. I mean, Biggs and Tank,
And then they're plugged in, right? You have to be plugged in.
So you start realizing like the less you can experience of your own reality is the more that the reality is being controlled by them. So the less you can see in your daily day, the more interested like the reality will become because it's so broadly dynamic. So the Matrix is kind of, I don't want to go too deep in the Matrix. I will do it soon, but I really wanted just to point it out mainly because the Animatrix is so important. And also because originally it wasn't going to be Keanu Reeves. I'll at least give you that story. Keanu Reeves wasn't going to be in the Matrix. that when it was written, you know, and like, so there's like a whole spiel about Sophia, right? So, you know, the lady says that she wrote the book, and we'll have her very soon. We're going to talk to the lady. So she wrote the original script treatment that became Terminators and The Matrix. And it's a very fascinating story, at least. But she has a new book called The Third Eye, and it's a trip. And I think that even is a reason by itself, besides whether or not it's correct, is like, it's an interesting story that, you know, needs to be just addressed. That they did see her work before they created The Matrix, and there was a court case at one point that did happen, more or less. But Keanu Reeves,
but also about Keanu Reeves, there's a ton of either Mandela effects about him or doppelgangers throughout history, like Louis Massaris Botet, a French painter, illustrator, and he did child books. Also, I don't know how to say it, but another painter, and then a few other actors throughout history.
Yeah.
So
there's some weird stuff going on with the time traveler from Bill and Ted. And you know, you'll notice that there's a lot of interesting stories about him. Let's say, for instance, the 47 Ronin, which is kind of like the more real version of The Last Samurai, or the American Samurai story. And his involvement in the movie Speed, as well as his like crazy surfer films.
Some people are saying in our chat that he's kind of like Enoch.
Yeah, well, that's an interesting, you know, if you think about, I was about to say Walking in the Clouds, which is a weird movie no one really thinks about, but he's in a bunch of weird movies because he walked away from Hollywood after Speed and he made all these weird artsy films. And Walking in the Clouds is one of the greatest stories, you know, about a man who after the war meets like another Tartarian family that have had their plantation for decades or centuries before it was America. They're like, this recipe is 200 years before your constitution. And they've been living under persecution as America is like spreading across their land. And then like the burning of their crops and everything. Like he's in like everything. Even he plays the bad guy in How to Kill Your Husband or whatever that is, with How to Murder Your Husband, which is like a pretty trip movie, I think. I forget that's the right title.
I've never seen that one. Oh wait, are you showing Walk in the Cloud? Wait, what one are you showing right
now? Love You to Death. That's the other one.
Oh, okay.
Love You to Death. Okay, I have to like now search through things really fast. But Love You to Death is a movie that there's a man who's like kind of like the priest. He's an Italian man who has affairs, and John Rivers. River Phoenix. Gosh. Is in it, and they have to assassinate Michael Klein, right? Michael Klein, yeah, and he's married to a Yugoslavian lady, and it's a trippy movie. And Keanu Reeves is a back character, and then he did Walking in the Clouds, and Walking in the Clouds is the movie where, you know, his family are basically farmers.
Tartarians, right? They're kind of like gypsies, like that have. Kind of like, I don't know. That's
they're like Spanish. They're like Spanish gypsies that have a winery or something like that. So the Romana, and you start thinking about Romana and the Roma and the roaming around of the rowing men and the Russians, and that's Ruskins, and then you said Belarus earlier, which is
I did.
Thing. So there's some interesting stuff about Keanu Reeves, but Keanu Reeves wasn't the original choice for The Matrix. Originally, they wanted Will Smith. And Will Smith turned down The Matrix because he was like, I got a better deal. I'm going to make a movie called Wild Wild West. And Wild Wild West, you know, like is a very different movie. It's like a sci-fi, steam tech, great word, movie. Kevin Smith has a great story about the producer of it was going to make Superman Lives with him and said, you have to include a giant spider. When the movie didn't get made, the only thing that ended up in his next movie that mattered to him was the giant metal spider at the end of the movie. So there's something
like the Cthulhu of the movie.
He's super like the adamant that he had to have a giant spider as like the villain of the movie. Also Salma Hayek, which was like the center stage of the Weinstein circumstance, because she refused to please him to make Frida, and Edward Norton ended up having to produce and write the script for her because she refused to go along with him any further than he like pushed her, which is an interesting thing in and of itself, which includes the Klein man, Klein, who is from that movie with Keanu Reeves, Love You to Death. So it's a weird synchronicity that the movie that ties these two together is Michael Klein, but he plays an agent of the FBI who has programmed this man, and this man is sort of a daring, debonair, boulevardier, if you will, like Triple X. But what's interesting about Triple X is that at the time there was the X Corps and the double X Corps. So if you look at X Corps, and be careful when you do it, hookers, Civil War, something that you'll find out that it's kind of a trip is that Joseph Hooker, which is supposedly where the name of hookers came from, had a legion, kind of like the Joy Division, they were called the Hookers Legion, and so that's where the word hooker supposedly comes from, is because these prostitutes followed around the military as they destroyed the Confederacy, and they would go from town to town, literally raping and pillaging. But they found that if they brought prostitutes, it would help ease them out of raping as much. So hookers just relax, they're hookers, and that actually started to catch on. And so the movie kind of centers around this group of technomancers that are going around this Tartaric, Red Dead Redemption era. And there's, and they're biracial, there's no certain problem with that. They go from one area to the other area, like without ever experiencing really racism, even when dealing with the Confederacy. So they make it pretty clear it's not such a big issue. The biggest issue is the changing from the Union Federation, which has submarines and technology, and like this guy's a drag queen who has false breasts in the movie. Like it goes full bosom buddies, but it ends up that he teaches everyone how to align themselves with the Federation instead of with the Confederacy, which would have certain sovereignties. And the man, the whole time he's doing this, is a crazy disabled guy in a wheelchair. And this guy in the wheelchair is a techno-punk, and he has spider legs, so he can control everything. So I bring it up only because this is the movie that that Will Smith decided to be in instead of The Matrix. And originally The Matrix would have been Will Smith. I mean, I wonder if I just typed that in really quickly. Someone must have made some pretty cool fan art, right? Like, I would hope. Let's just hope. It would have been like this probably or something. I mean, they thought about it. Like people, he was an enemy of the state. Like, but so why did he do this? Well, so Will Smith said, the thing about the Matrix, they explained it to me. It didn't make any sense. Like, okay, it's real. It's not real. What's the point? Well, it's like these different spaces that they go into, like video game levels, and they're all pre-programs or whatever. It's like simulation theory or simulation. I guess they're calling it now. But they have this whole reality that he's not comfortable with. So yeah, they ended up with Keanu Reeves, which, if you know much about the Wachowski siblings, makes sense. But the story is that. So what would have happened instead is anybody's guess, but it seems like, the other thing is originally the musical guest that wanted to make the song for The Matrix was Kenny Loggins. And so Kenny Loggins, look at this guy really quickly. He looked like Jesus Christ. I think the internet's a little slow. So, all right, this is the Keep the Fire album. So Kenny Loggins, he would dress like Jesus Christ, and he had this album called This Is It, which is dedicated to his dying father during the beginning of the Age of Aquarius. And he says, all right, this is it. Make no mistake where you are. Because I was telling my father that he was going to die, and he needed to really clean it up, act up, take the surgery if he wanted to live. So he wrote him this song, and then that song helped him decide to keep his heart surgery. And in the freaking album cover of the Kenny Loggins album is a volcano erupting with light fire. So that's an interesting aside about Kenny Loggins. But what he said is I wanted to make the Matrix song after he'd done Top Gun, and he said, okay, I would call it It's Not What You Think It Is. But Top Gun 2 is coming out now. And so this is the next thing, Top Gun Maverick. And so, Tom Cruise from The Church is going to star in a film where they need humans who have, maybe OT level 8 in order to control rockets that have artificial intelligence that, they're not, it's better. And humans are somehow, somehow they're needed still. That's basically the ultimate point, is that you can't just fully automate everything. And what it is that you still need about the human intuition. So it's going to be weirdly fascinating. But it's called Top Gun Maverick, and then Maverick, of course, is Santa Cruz, where I'm from, which is the giant waves. So I just thought it was just like all of it at once. It's too funny. All right, that's my thing. Victor, do you got some stuff you want to share?
Well, I was trying going through the Mac. I have a giant folder that I could go through because I was. I think we landed on the topic of giants, didn't we?
Yes, absolutely.
But Odin, maybe do you have something since the last time?
Give me 1 second. I was gonna do those gateways, those like mega structures, and there's some in Massachusetts, so I could just start with that because obviously like they're made for giants, made by giants. You know what I mean? So let me just give me 1 second, so we don't do what I usually do and just jump through a bunch of files. 1 minute, guys.
How long have you guys been going for as of now?
About an hour.
Okay.
But we totally need you, buddy. We want to do something on the Giants, and I know you have a ton of new stuff. So let's get into that if you want. I'll just start by the one that I passed today, and it's huge, and it's in Andover. And do I need to switch to screen share?
I think so.
Okay. So am I sharing, guys? Yes. So this is Andover, Mass. And this is a massive, massive structure, and it's right outside of a cemetery.
Wow.
So the last video that Andreas and you guys just did as a hangout and posted, you were talking about some mega structures, like the one that you had the idea of being like the Jerusalem.
Oh yeah,
or
Temple of Solomon.
you know, yeah, you remember the Temple of Solomon?
Yeah.
Well, and then we talked a little. You guys talked a little about. I'm just gonna catch everybody up. Talked a little bit about church and church tech, and me and you were talking about outside of just churches was cemeteries, because there's a lot of tech inside of cemeteries. You see a lot of phalluses, and you see these huge gates, and it looks like old Tartarian structures. Now, I just wanted to kind of show this first for everybody, and feel free to comment while I just bring up all their pictures. But like, look how big this is. I mean, and you can see on the top, if I zoom in, hold on 1 second. You see those? It almost looks like ribbons right there.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. And I felt like maybe that was talking a little bit about like a Stargate or about plasma. That was the first thing that came to mind. Yes, Mikey.
Try and pay attention to the YouTube chat being a couple of seconds behind. The upload is 8-9 seconds. So.
All right, I'm looking at the chat right now. The Matrix would have sucked if Will Smith was the lead. Twilight Mist and Brett, I see your comments, and Tweezy and Beezy and Queenie Beeswax. Those are such great names.
Hold on, I'll minimize that, and I can look at both. So I just want to see where we're at. All right, cool.
I can tell you what's
now
happening.
that you mentioned the megastructures, I think I have perhaps the largest collection of pictures of that particular Temple of Solomon. Yes. I've been collecting them for a long time.
All right, so let's show one more.
Yeah.
No, actually, let's just switch right over. Let's go right back to you, and that'll be a smoother transition.
Okay. Because Brittany was like, "Oh, we need to make a session about this temple because people haven't seen it yet." So this is it's a version of Jerusalem. It's not certain which Jerusalem it is, but it is the Jerusalem which has got the large Temple of Solomon. It's right here. And you'll see here the Mount Zion here.
So wait, you're trying to tell us this all happened before the 1500s, and yet it's still a start for it? Gosh.
I'm not sure, but it has that weird it has a weird star shape, and
We just looked at a
flowers
fort like
and-
this in Rome just like a minute before you got here.
Yeah.
Mike was showing a fort looked very similar to this. It's
Wow.
incredible.
No,
Well,
it really is. It's so weird that we're all in like the same collective conscious. Needs to be said. Stated it. Go on.
you can see here Jerusalem, it says, and well, let's call this a star fort because if it is and can be considered a star fort, it is before the age of gunpowder. It is,
Wow.
you know, in biblical times. So the war argument is dead here because according to them, they don't have gunpowder in this time. So why would you need protection from cannons by these bastion
I
angles?
was just gonna say that. I'm so sorry. I was gonna say cannons and mega cannons. Go on. That's great. You're killing it.
Going to that exactly, but you can see here there's a mud flooded. There's some mud flooding going on here, and the temple is mud flooded. So I have other versions of it, of course. Let me just find that. This is another version. You can see here it is mud flooded, and they have begun starting building things alongside it. This is the roof.
Couple of
As you
seconds,
know.
Victor. It's a bit slow.
Oh, can you hear me?
No, it's not. The audio is perfectly fine, but the YouTube video is a bit slower than what we're
Yes.
presenting live. So there's a bit of a delay going on. So if you present an image, it takes the chat like 10, 15 seconds maybe for them to show up.
But it doesn't do that.
Okay,
with
but
audio.
So if
are you seeing what
show
I'm
an
seeing
image,
right
it'll
now?
take a couple of seconds before you actually start explaining about the image, so the chat can catch up on what you're saying.
Okay.
Makes sense?
Let me know when you're seeing what I'm seeing.
We can see it.
Okay. This is
Are
as
you
you've seen, it's like-
saying that the audio is not in sync with the video, Mike? Is that what you're trying to say?
For me, it is, right?
For other people, it's not. Okay, that's very interesting. All right, I'll put that in a note. I'm gonna probably send that as a message to Jitsi. Okay, Victor, sorry. Go back to your.
No problem, guys. I want to make this as, you know.
Yeah, it's all new technology. I mean, this is the first time we've used Jitsi.org and Minds.com instead of the Google anomaly, and it's going to be interesting to see how this works. You know,
Yeah.
this is the beginning.
Yeah, but here you can see the roof of the temple, and we've seen that giant megastructures down here. This is the roof, and here are the bridges, as we've seen before, and the mud flooded environment, which reached the roof of this structure. So I just wanted to show that. Let me just close this down. It's not really
Now,
ideal.
When you go through this archive, can you see the names of some of these giants?
Not usually.
Okay. No, still cool. Still cool.
I have some good mythology about giants, though. I feel like I keep finding pretty good stories about things like Paul Bunyan from like China or from like West China or Turkey, where it's like essentially a lot of the Tartarian stories seem to have not been fully erased, and they've got all these great stories about giants that liked metal in their coffee. You know, kind of like these really strong guys that were like really, really large, and they were from a separate mother or some separate father or something like that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
What about some of the giants in America, like being a part of, you know, the industrial age and like helping out with like the ships or, you know, like women?
Well, you know,
fight-
even in the
What's that?
even in like public school books, I remember there was some stuff about the Lakota and the Cherokee seeing long blonde-haired, pale, blue-eyed giants. And then there's the Spanish talking about giant black giants in California, like female giants that were like huge, like Khalifa
Yes.
or Califate.
Yeah.
So there's
Let me-
That is
Yeah.
your name, Califate.
because the caliphate is like the Arabic word for, you know, in Spanish has about 11,000 words that come from Arabic. So the Caliphate was what the Empire of Hispania was. So she's the queen of the empire. You know, it's like the matriarchy instead of the patriarchy.
Yeah,
So, cool.
there's a lot of loan words in the Spanish language from Arabic. That's true. But this is, I've shown this before. This is the giant rock statue of Mount Athos in ancient Greece, but in current day Macedonia. It's not there anymore, of course.
Couldn't he
this,
just be a dead warrior, like, and then being a part of the mountain?
This is reported to actually have been built, Odin, by Alexander the Great's architect called Dinocrates. And books report this was built and it was there for a long time.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. I know.
Huge.
It should have been included in the wonders of the world, but it's not. The fact that it's not is just crazy because this is the biggest wonder of the world, as far as I'm concerned, I have seen ever. Yeah, built by an architect which was under Alexander the Great's control, called Dinocrates. Oh, let me just because this is my wonder file. I call this oh yeah, here you begin to see the Temple of Solomon. This is one of the best depictions I have of it. Oh yeah, this is from the Van der Haar atlases, which Martin has shown, and you can see here it is mud flooded again. The mud reached to the roof of the structure, and you can see here these buildings are big, yet very small compared to this. It is an amazing structure, and it's crazy we didn't learn about it. As I said in the previous video, a lot of people, when I showed this,
it's amazing. It's dug in. You can see the wall to the side of it. I mean, it's all it's exactly like Clinton, Massachusetts. Or just before you were on, we were showing a picture of Clinton, Massachusetts, where there's a temple like this that was dug out, and there's a wall that's a new wall put up to save it. It's incredible.
So like with Clinton and many other places like it, and like what you're showing now of Solomon, do you feel that if we kept digging, that there would be like, say, another 300 feet? There could be like even more structures like that they just haven't found.
We keep finding tunnels.
I know.
Yeah,
I know.
I would think so, Odin. I would really think so.
So what's the name of the Boring Company? Oh, right, the Boring Company. Should look into that a bit.
Oh, it's very boring. Don't look into it.
Oh, that's so funny. No, but like you talked about in the last video, how some of the mountains that we see, you know, and the tunnels that we find are, you know, old hallways of buildings, right? And like, you know, it could be some like even a classroom for, you know, their teaching.
Well,
you know what I mean?
when you start getting really far out and you start thinking about if this stuff, the deeper you go, is the least disturbed, it can last the longest, including multiple resets. So if you have technology that's designed for that purpose, it makes more sense why. I'm going to really quickly, just for a second, go to my screen just for 30 seconds, just to show you. The Boring Company is making tunnels to other tunnels that are already, they're saying they found tunnels that are already there, and they're going to start using their Teslas on rails to go through the boring tunnels, and they're going to connect to already existing tubes. So going really far out, you could say it's logical, at least, that these systems were already there, kind of the way that the old hospitals have those vacuum tubes for messages that were going from one place to another.
Yeah, remember we talked
and
about
if you can get from one, and so this is going to be the craziest, and like it's now a hypothesis, not a theory.
Right.
If you can get from one starport to another through tunnels, then all of a sudden it starts to make a lot of sense why they're Roman road width, because they're the size of chariots, which can be on vacuums, and they can be sent back and forth.
Now, have you guys ever seen the show Shannara Chronicles? It's on Netflix.
No. Oh, is that the new Avatar: The Last Airbender thing?
No, it's a show about elves or like the Elu, and so it goes. It's really cool actually, because when they have the first episode and they're doing their starting scene, they are showing like almost like structures like you would see like the Twin Towers like just toppled over, and then the silicon, like all the glory coming back, and like all the trees, and all the green starting building over that, and then once the show starts going, they're out and they're doing their adventure. They fall through the ground into a classroom, and it's under the ground and it's preserved perfectly. So I suggest anybody that is loving this topic should definitely check that out as just a cool series to watch. Shannara Chronicle.
Wow.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely check that out. Netflix.
that sounds very interesting, because a classroom, if there really was a classroom below ground, that would suggest that before the mud flood, there were the classrooms such as we have today.
Who's to say that they're the exact same style, but there could be that they were built for certain purposes. Like if you think about how Super Sentai presents it, right? Like so the Power Rangers have Super Sentai. They have classrooms. Let me go really quickly back to my screen too. In the Japanese mythology of Power Rangers, which Power Rangers comes from a show called Super Sentai. They've been going on every year for 40 or 50 years. And every year it's a free show on TV, but they have a new action figure, and the new action figure you have to buy or else your parents support. So it's a pretty clever marketing scheme. But the idea is that there are ancient underground tunnels that have mega powerful, let's see if you put Power Rangers movie 1995. That's right. They have like they find a room that's underground that has this amazing holodeck technology, and there's it's not working. Oh dear, you couldn't see it.
You can see it very small on the sides. I don't know if that's what you were trying to do.
Oh no, that's very strange. Why is this the case?
Oh, he has to hit the button on the bottom that says stop screen sharing for a moment, and then you switch back. If he goes over to near the three dots, there's like a little button, Victor, that you can press.
No, I don't think that's the reason. I think it's my fault, maybe. I mean, like
I have to stop screen sharing.
Or maybe he can override it.
I'm gonna read.
Okay, I'll press stop.
Just for 1 second.
No, it's just.
Uh-oh. Hey guys, so I'm still here. Victor, you still there? Oh, he's back.
Yeah.
Now I'm back. Gosh, it's like hot in Spain. My hair is
Looking cool, bro. Looking cool. I just wanted to add, while there's no commentary going, where in the Shannara Chronicles you see the return of the Golden Age. So say, it gets to a society based like ours, like in the Matrix, they say that your world happened like 6 times. So it would be like, the destruction, and then, the mud floods come, and the plasma reset, and then, you build over it, and then, they do a different type of reality where, the people have, elf ears, and there's, all different types of species of people, and then, say it happens again to them, and then, you go back to this. So it's just layer on layer on layer. So that's the idea. But go on.
Well, I was gonna say, like, so Power Rangers is, maybe it's kind of dated now, but it's pretty rad, and it's a show that was about this concept. So you have Zordon, who at the beginning of the 1995 film, it says, 10,000 years ago, Zordon showed up, or Zordon was defeated Rita Repulsa and put her into an egg, and all of the Titans put them underneath an eggs. And then they are awoken after 10,000 years, and Zordon has been waiting at his base. I think I could type Zordon, probably, so you can see that. And Zordon has he's like a tele-transhumanist, like super deity, human kind of superhuman thing that has the power, Nick Cage, the power to be able to run this great temple and stay immortal, where his age boosting thing that keeps him from dying, and it's a crystal bed, literally just a bed of crystals, and that's what keeps him alive. But he's able with his robot to run the ship, and the robot is Alpha, and he's like, I'm Alpha, which is like the best. And then there's like the 5 Rangers, right? which are the, the black, yellow, red, pink. And then the Green Ranger, who becomes the White Ranger. And the Green Ranger is pretty interesting because he started out as being like the evil character, but he naturally was the natural born best leader. And so once he shows up, he's using the same technology as the Rangers, and he ultimately ends up in charge of the entire Ranger squad, essentially, because he's like the right one. So there's something weird, interesting about his flute and the music he plays and how he's associated with evil, but then ends up doing the right move and saving everybody because he has the Pink Ranger, which makes him behave, better behaved individual, and then this kid wants to join. But it's a show all about resets, and if you see the newer Power Rangers, they go every season back and forth creating, new districts. Now they're in New Zealand, and it's always next to a volcano in somewhere crazy. They've got some sort of a superpower temple that's 10,000 years old, and it has culture that is lost from our civilization. And where is it? It's like above LA, or it's above Angel Grove or whatever it's called. It's in New Zealand, or it's in LA, or it's something like that.
So if it's about like resets and they're like a new civilization and they're next to volcanoes, do you think they get big because of the volcanoes? And then, do after a reset, do you believe that people can get advanced, type of like superhero powers, like some people on YouTube usually talk about?
Well, so what's interesting about that is that plays totally into 3 or 4 different things that connect this all together. One of them being Scientology, another with volcanoes and OT level 8. The other being with Japanese Super Sentai. So Super Sentai is the original show. So Power Rangers was purchased Sentai footage, and they just cut it out, all the action sequences, and then they filmed American Kids. So there's a show that goes on 20 or 30 years with different outfits in the 70s even, and they have like exploding cars and vehicles, and they have all of these personal demons that they face, and they end up having superpowers as well as being able to morph and grow. They are connected to technology, so as they evolve, they learn how to use those powers, which is another show like Kamen Rider talks a lot about that. But it's all about like the solidarity of the squadron and how people can connect to mix and use each other's powers with symmetry and teamwork, which is a very interesting concept. It's different than sentai. It's like the squadron or the team or the classroom or the group. So these are a class. This is like your average class in a Japanese high school or an American California high school. They're supposed to be, they have their own representative identity, but they work together in a larger group. And what they do is they morph, but they can only morph so long as they have the powers of the volcano energy source, which is this crazy temple. So, I mean, it plays into Shintoism, Japanese Shintoism, and how energy is supposed to work, and also how they evolve over time to use the different kinds of powers they get. They actually get brain implants and transhumanist features, and Super Sentai becomes a lot more clear what's really going on with the Power Rangers, because they have chips in their brains and things like that, and they're like, it's much more transhumanist than they reveal at first. Even though if you really watch the Power Rangers, I think 8-year-olds get it better than we do, that they have chips in their heads. That's what makes it possible for them. They're becoming neural laced, like Elon Musk is doing with his other company, which I forget, which is called Neuro Perception or whatever, which is like, he's got the drilling into the earth and drilling into your minds, ladies and gentlemen. But I think there is something to be said about the power of, these natural substances. And every time we find one of these systems, there seems to be like a vortex, which is what we were talking about volcanoes earlier. Let's look that up. But if it's true that there's a vortex that's pushing things up out of this vortex, then we might have found technology that's being used, for the purpose of producing energy. Like there might be someone that actually understands this, and it sounds maybe like it's advanced, or maybe it's starting to make sense. Like, okay, well, this is something that can be done. We can actually harness this kind of energy in a way or another. It like lightning strikes it, and there's something going on with these volcanoes. But if that's the case, then how long has that been going on? And so that's really our main focus, I guess. We're going to start proving more and more is that these were in use. Volcanoes are erupting and were in use for being harnessed by the people, the cultures of Tartary. centuries or maybe millennia ago. And it's at least centuries ago, there was a major, major disaster, or maybe many major disasters that were linked together. And when that happened, it took maybe not 80 years or less for the entire society to lose most of everything. And then after that, we started referring to it as the least advanced civilization, as we started to collect all of their technology, it's left over, the remnants in the farthest reaches away from its center. And we're starting to think that the centers might have been in places that are basically lost around Indonesia, or in the seas between the Atlantic, or near Friesland, which Denmark is and Holland are just in between this area that was sank. So moving along, just wanted to say there's more and more proof, I think, but it's interesting that so much media is about this idea of there being a team saving the world, fights Eskimos in the ice wall or whatever Power Rangers do, and that they get their power from volcanoes, which is again what is a big part of Scientology, volcanoes, Xenu. You guys have probably seen that, but that's a huge part of it, is that there's the idea of spirits being put into volcanoes.
The founder of the Phoenicians being called Sino.
Right.
Yeah, you're right.
And now we know this about volcanoes and stuff like that. And what if the Temple of Solomon really is something to do with hydrothermal energy, volcanic harvesting? As Nathan pointed out, there was this dwarven in some sort of mythological tale. There was this dwarf city where they created a huge foundry, just as in the Moria mines in the Lord of the Rings, and they harnessed the volcanic activity nearby a giant volcano, and basically they used the giant structure to keep it cool or keep it in the right state. But so I wonder whether volcanic activity really is related to such a thing like this. Are you seeing again my screen?
Yes.
Right. Yeah, we're definitely on you. And it's something we've been noticing all around Spain and France and Denmark, is all the star forts, or even Holland, all the star forts are connected to each other's volcanoes and rivers. There's always a river and a volcano next to it.
Well, there aren't any volcanoes in Denmark, but I know there is a subterranean volcano beneath Kassel in Germany. So there may be subterranean volcanoes beneath us. I don't know. But as you can see,
there are amazing hydrothermals in Denmark.
So
But yeah,
what about bringing it back to Lee said, a Taurus field? Do you think that it could be a different type of Stargate at some point? You could use it to get into, say, Tartarus, or a different dimension in the under, or as also.
If you think about certain movies, there is this movie about the sensor to the journey of the sensor to the Earth, and they go to Iceland and they journey through a volcano down into another world. And if you look at Disney's Atlantis, the animation of it, they go to Iceland and they find a book on Iceland about Atlantis, and then from that book they go into the Atlantic Ocean and down through a tunnel underneath the ocean floor, and
cool.
they go down into this what would be a sink, the same way a sink works. So they go into this air pocket beneath the ocean floor, and from this air pocket they walk through a cave system until they reach an underground world where Atlantis is harbored, this huge city. And the funny thing about that movie is that a volcanic reset happens in the movie, and a volcano nearby, an subterranean volcano, goes off and threatens the city and civilization of Atlantis underground. And they have this weird protection technology where by crystals they activate a lot of statues, and these statues, they started walking, and they create this force field around the city which protects from the lava. It's just weird that they would depict that, but But I wanted to tell you guys, this is the inner court of the Temple of Solomon on top of the roof. This is what it looks like. This is from the Pierre
So
van der Haar.
massive. It's so
Yeah, it's
massive.
massive.
Still, yeah.
So
Wow.
massive. Yeah. It's beyond anything we have ever seen in terms of building. This is in the biblical area, and it looks like a huge plaza in Europe, something that is even beyond that. And the Jews here they're probably all giants, and they are doing science in all sorts of ways. I think there's illumination particle over here, which we would see in the 1800s and the 1700s. This is
Yep.
a fountain.
Happy booths. One of the happy booths.
Yeah,
Right? Like Martin says.
the happy booth. The happy booth. This is like an ethanol where they do human sacrifice, I think, or something else.
I want to show that they found a structure really similar to this in Turin and in Guadarrama. And so one of the things that's really trippy, you look at the Kailasa temple, you know, there's the African example, there's these dugout temples, which are huge, that are about the size of the Solomon Temple, the same style with these giant rocks. And Turin's got all of these tunnels, which they look like they're poured, some of them, like they were, you know, they glowed through a certain shape, and then all of a sudden they're on the outside, they've been put some like rock, you know, formations. But each one of these places, like Guadarrama, Turin, Gibraltar, several places I've been recently, like they have the story that those are the entrances to the Tartarus, to death, to the caves of Hades, and that's where underground monkeys traveled up to get to Europe. You know, there were monkeys from Africa that came through Gibraltar. That Gibraltar actually was a tunnel system that monkeys got all the way up to Denmark and died out 30,000 years ago. So there's monkeys all across Europe, which is another crazy thing if you're looking at the Gita. But once you start seeing this,
Gita.
Yeah, there's a lot of stories about monkeys and how they're more intelligent than we have really given them credit. Although I think some people have now, but like even still, you might be surprised like what civilization level some animals might have had. You know, just because we're seeing now them throwing spears. But so in Turin, these humans had a photographic, you know, picture of this guy, which we thought of as Jesus Christ, which some people think is Anna Maitreya or something else, or maybe it's a character, but it's like an individual that looks like a sort of an X-ray. So the technology that they had at that point, you know, using some sort of radiation to like transmit like a full body of this person through inks, you know, through light that like is causing it. They're seeing more and more evidence that this area actually did have some sort of civilization underneath it that was lost. And that these caves are now reclaimed by churches, right? And so Turin's one of them, but Guadarrama is another really interesting one.
So you're saying that radiation of that image of Christ was now or of before, and it was kind of like a communication so he could, you know, go through the portals and show himself every once in a while in different civilizations?
I'm not fully sure I have like a great answer yet. What it seems like to me is interesting, at least, is that Turin had some sort of technology, because I don't think that was just a painting, right? But I do think that thing has some sort of a chemical burn that, with light and darkness, transmitted like a kind of a print of a body. And
well, you see that with the Mormons too, right? Like he came to Joseph Smith and visited. So go on. I just wanted to.
No, it's totally fine. I mean, I just don't want to say that I'm sure of anything yet, but I get the feeling that one of the things is that there's high technology there, and that's a picture from, you know, maybe like before, or the technology being reused or something, but there's obviously like, it's not as clear as something from today. So it makes you wonder what was going on if that's what they had. But each one of these places, let's suffice to say, these are caves with high technology zones. The eighth wonder of the world is supposed to be right outside of Guadarrama. It's a huge city built by Toledo, a castle the size of an airport. And there's all these caves and all these ghost stories. And also, this is where supposedly NASA had built their base in order to broadcast from Australia to Spain relays by Relay 2 to rebroadcast the moon landing footage. So it was through this spot of Spain, which is a trip, that's the story. But it has all of these stories. They have all these sayings that they saw more footage than they were meant to, and a bunch of people were like hunted down. There's like crazy ghost stories about the tunnels. There's, you know, the grave of Franco. The whole region is the most important and probably precious region of Spain, which is saying something, and especially now after seeing so much of Spain. But it's all built on top. Look at this; it's built on top of what could be a mound. Whether it was a monolith, I think is the word I'm going to use instead of silicon tree. It could be a fungal monolith, like some sort of a mushroom. It even still would have minerals, right? And what do you see right in front of it? You have that same square design as like the Solomon Temple, and it's huge. And maybe something's been rebuilt, but still, aquifers everywhere.
Temple here, Andreas. Like here you can see, you saw it before, the earth was up here, and here in Nebuchadnezzar's time, where he's taking the temple, it is not mud flooded. Here you can see outside of the city. This was all gone in all the other depictions, completely decimated.
Right.
And here the huge city is, or no, the huge temple is. You can see it here behind it. And it's funny how the giant temple is depicted the same way, right? So we're pretty sure that this temple was actually somewhere in the world at one point. It's hard to say when and where, but we're looking for that answer. And right now it's here you can see a depiction where it's being destroyed, or another part of the temple is being destroyed. I think this is the destruction of the second temple by Titus Vespasian in around the time of Christ, I think in 40 AD. And here you can see some sort of directed energy weapon, perhaps, because look how the stones are burning. It's so weird. Look at that. This is
they're almost melting. It's plasma heads.
Yeah, maybe it's natural, maybe it's artificial, but at least
the fascist weapon.
And it's really weird that stones would be burning. I don't know why that would be. I don't know how stones burn.
Well, you start thinking about volcanoes, and it makes a little bit more sense. They're spewing things out, and they're hitting cities like major eruptions scattered across, raining, falling stars from volcanoes.
Well, that's a very interesting thought. I talked about Brittany with that. I talked with Brittany about that. Sorry, and he has a lot of things to say about it. Here you can see the temple is burning. Stone is burning. Why would that be?
I was just gonna add. So you know how when we talk about comets, a lot of YouTubers talk about illnesses and getting like miasma or different infections or turning into a loony person, going to the loony bin from having a comet around. Right now, can we find a connection between when a volcano goes off and the debris that it shoots out? Can that be in itself get people an infection because it's coming from a different part of the earth, plasma taking from centuries and centuries? Or do we think that the comet and the destruction in that sense is a totally different aspect than the volcanoes?
Well, I mean, people keep trying to say that there's no such thing as radiation, but like everywhere we find these in sanatoriums for plagues near volcanoes. So is there not something there? Is it virus? Is it radiation? Who knows? But like tuberculosis farms and plague farms are everywhere near Campi Flegrei or near Guadarrama and in South America too. So there might be something.
I mean, it has to be something to it, because if we go in either direction, say if we go through, the dome and the firmament cracking and the plasma coming in, and, it almost being like Starro, or like, a little Martian type of plasma that goes to your face and turns you into a zombie and it gets you sick. That's one direction. You can go in the other way where it's a volcano and, you have all these loony asylums, like you just said, or, comets. But either way, we're seeing in these pictures that we're making the connection that the people are going crazy, that there's the destruction, and then there's almost like an, plasma warfare. So it can be either the three things, but I like the volcanoes a lot more lately. Like you guys are really getting me onto this, because this volcanoes, it makes sense, and people are getting sick and they're going crazy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's funny how you said that about where does the miasma come from, and I just read an article about a reset in Barbary where they talk about giant earthquakes opening up the earth and giant grasshoppers coming up from the earth, and Brittany talked about that some subterranean volcanoes could actually be spawning animals right out of the bat. Like the
Yep.
animals don't migrate from volcano to volcano; they come from the volcano somehow.
Right.
And I know that's very,
yeah.
I know it's very fringe, but Brittany has something to say about it, and I think we should get her on at some point to
I
talk
think
about it.
I think we absolutely have to, because if there's an area, you know, under us, beneath us, this subterranean level where there's this enough radiation that's getting these, you know, bugs or animals that big, and you know it looks like they're coming directly from the volcano, it's definitive proof that volcanoes cause radiation. You know,
Yeah,
and right?
or maybe
It's
just not radiation, maybe electrical, something electrical, right? Because
sure,
if we pump electricity into vegetables, we can make them grow. So why would it be different to any other biological being? I don't
right?
think it would. So I think electricity is the key to understanding the different portions of size, and also the cause of a good environment, like the right proportions of perhaps electrical
Right.
ionizations in local areas. I don't know.
And also
But
radio.
guys,
I think radio. Sorry, go ahead.
this is the construction of the top of the Temple of Solomon. Here is the inner court being constructed first. And I think this is a view from a hill, and there's a gap here. But it's funny because a lot of the scenes we see of this temple, we can see there's no hill here, and the entire city is constructed on top. So there may have been some reconstruction going on, or they are lying about the stages of the temple, or maybe they're confused themselves. But this Pierre Vandahar Atlas seems to be more esoteric than a lot of other stuff. Here you can see the plans for the roof temple.
Yep.
There's an entire roof of
Wow.
the temple. This is the inner temple. There's different
I'm sorry.
plazas in here.
I'm
No
sorry. I
problem.
lose the connection there. Could I just add one more thing before we go too far in a different direction? And this is kind of just a crazy connection.
Oh,
Someone in our chat just talked about ashes and them being like a way to kill possibly radiation and illnesses, right? And it just got me thinking of Ash Wednesday in Christianity, or maybe just like for the Catholics, they do Ash Wednesday, and maybe that had something to do with the volcanoes in trying to get rid of the sickness in some way. And I was just wanted to add that as a thought, and to viewer.
Yeah. Was it Elke?
Yes, I think it was.
Elke is going to be on really soon. I'm pretty stoked. I've been hoping that we get her to join.
Yeah, Elke is in the chat. She just talked about Ash is a virus killer. So yeah, we're gonna get her on at some point
Awesome.
when she has a computer again.
Very cool, very cool. I hope to be there.
Well, I forget now because I was going a little deep. We were talking about volcanoes and caves and radio. So this is a thing when they start talking about radiation. But if you talk about radio elements, you can see like what kinds of let's see, crystal. You can see different kinds of crystal radio that works. And so what's interesting about this is it's copper with a rod around it with a speaker, which is a magnet usually. And then there's a range of electricity that you're reading into, because you say, I want to see this part. And it works very similarly to an old radio where you can see one station, another station, each wire is a different part of the radio. So this works off of a radio, what are you allowed to say anymore? Radiating crystal. called germanium. And germanium is one of many, there's different ones. And this is what so many people talk about. They're like, okay, well, there's no value whatsoever to plutonium. I'm just going to say, calm down. Like there really is uses for all this stuff for radio, and you can actually maybe even hurt yourself with it. Who's to say? I wouldn't want to say you couldn't. I think that's kind of crazy to lead people to anything that might be dangerous. But what I would say is be very careful with this thing because it is powerful. And you can radio, you can sense different sorts of vibrations and different sorts of electricity and different sorts of frequencies of radio waves that are coming out of these vibrations from these crystals. So this gets into a lot about what happened in the 1800s with crystal radio and with crystal television and crystal airwaves, UHF signals, etc. But it's the kind of stuff that without it, we wouldn't be able to communicate. What makes it possible for these people to talk to each other, from one part of the earth to another part of the earth? Well, a huge part of it's radio. And a lot of people will say that it's just all fiber optic lines or something, but I mean, I don't know, man. I've used radios; they're real. I've made one. I don't know what you want me to say. They're a thing. So,
if you, I know there is a day, guys, but I think this is some of the best mud flood evidence I have ever come across. The city of Jerusalem is just a complete mud flood tale in itself. If you can see, I know there is a delay, so it isn't showing the picture I'm showing yet to the live video. Now it is. You can see here the Temple of Solomon here again, and it is completely mud flooded. And they had to dug out this trench by the city. I think they're planning to fill it with water for sustaining the city. And you can see the landscape is completely decimated. And if we're going to say it was a flood, I don't know, because look at all these small hillsides. It would seem like the whole landscape is undulating or there's a frequency being transmitted through the earth, it would seem to me, to make these mud hills. I don't know if the artist was just depicting a random background, but I think this is pretty accurate. I think this might be an accurate depiction of what was actually seen at one point.
Yeah.
And
definitely.
Look at these hills.
It's like
and look at this. It's just crazy to think about the level of the mud flood here. It's very scary. And I'll try to get there's a lot of depictions of this. You can see here as well. And you guys, there is a circular city of David up here. And look at these. Can you see these porticos or gateways going up to the city?
Amazing. So there was a lifted already part. It's like several levels of
maybe like siphoning ways or something. I don't know. I think there's some sort of transportation going on with these, either water or something else. But you can see here the terraforming down here, making lands and growing stuff. Look, this building is very huge, but yet it is very small compared to a lot of the other buildings. This is like, I think, a 10-story building. And this circular city is elevated. There's like a Circus Maximus here, like you have in Rome, with a giant obelisk in it. And here you have the outline of the Temple of Solomon. You can see here the mud hill going down to it. It's crazy. This city is just crazy in every respect. And I don't know which part of Jerusalem it is. It's at least the most magnificent part of Jerusalem, I think. It may have been the Jerusalem that was in the Americas.
Well, wanted to show actually, because you had said that, is Ecuador really quickly. I'll go back to you in a second, but like Ecuador has these giants. There's like a city of giants. It's actually, they found tons of bones and stones, and the stonework is just insane. It's bigger than any stone of pyramids. And these giants. Sorry.
I'm about to hop off. I'm really tired.
Okay. Yeah, we can cut this short pretty soon.
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
yeah, have a good night, man. And like,
Good night, Mikey.
All right,
Love
catch
you,
you guys later.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah.
All right, man.
Cheers.
I'm just
Cheers.
gonna really quickly show off
See you,
some of
Mike.
these giants they found in Ecuador. 'Cause some of these giants are pretty impressive. Some of these are kind of, you never know what's real, so always make sure you check. But in the Valley of the Giants, there's forests, there's volcanoes, there's pyramids that they've been dug, they've repainted, and they found rather large skeletons, some of them, and this is the most impressive one. It's actually in a museum. And so, I mean, go to Ecuador yourself and check it out. I get the feeling that there could have actually been really huge people that built some of this stuff in this land with giant turtles that lived 200, 400 years, crazy stuff. But it's all underneath trees, so you can't find a lot of it. It's like taking x-rays and lasers from drones, from Google Maps and things, just to find evidence of the giant forest. But what's a real trip is if you type Ecuador, Egypt, you can start finding some of this artwork, right, where the exact same artworks found in Egypt is in Ecuador. It's slightly different, but in a weird way, it's more specific in Ecuador than it is in Egypt. It's like the same art, but in Ecuador it has specified that this is there's all the messages still get through. You see the serpent, you see the sun, but there's something about the personality of the sun in the Ecuadorian one that just seems a little bit more detailed than even the Egyptian one. So I find that to be kind of interesting. I'm gonna go back to
Andreas, no,
Here, guys, this is an aerial view of the same city. Here you see the mud trench, and here's the temple, completely mud flooded. Here's the circular city of David on the Mount of Zion. Here's the star fort.
wow.
And this star fort is again pre-gunpowder, which decimates their argument of military efficacy of star forts. It's just forget about it, guys. Just forget about it.
This is
I don't know
crazy.
what else to say.
No, I know. It really is amazing.
Yeah, and I
So
love the
it's tunnels connecting every single one of these. They're before gunpowder, and obviously, you're saying that there has to be a connection that we're not seeing, like of tech, or what are you trying to point out other than?
Well, the first point is that if we presuppose the Scaligerian chronology, then their argument is dead, and they won't presuppose anything else. So either way, we win on that respect. If we can get them to presuppose something else, then we can begin to discuss whether there were there could have been a military use of star forts before gunpowder, or maybe gunpowder is older than the Scaligerian chronology admits.
Or
either way,
has other purposes. I mean, the thing is, we just barely got to the point where it's hard to rebuttal us about these existing. We're just trying to we for a long time just pointed out that these were there, and now we know where they are. We know the original maps and the original models. We have all the evidence of that. So the question is more become, do they have a different story now? Will they acknowledge that this picture was drawn in centuries ago that it says it was? And do they really believe these books exist? Because they do. And then, have they seen the Google Maps images that Mike's pointed out of star forts? Because they're there. And then they have to say, okay, well, this is for military purposes. And we have to say, well, is it really? Because there's so many other things that seem to point towards trade. If trade is the real reason for this existence, maybe technology becomes a traded commodity rather than a defense commodity. And it makes more sense why these things are so symmetrical, why they're all the same.
Yeah, totally. I agree, Andreas. Good point about trade. So that in one of the pages of the History of Engineering book, which has blown the star fort narrative right open, and Martin just showed that it says that the city of Vecchia in Italy, which is a star fort city that was built in around the time of Christ by the Romans allegedly, it was constructed for commerce, and it says nothing about Starfort military protection or anything like that. It talks about being constructed for commerce, and in other cases they talk about Starforts being hydraulic machines pumping water out of Lake Fuchino, which is just some of the best evidence we have for the real use of some of the Starforts. And I discussed this with a lot of skeptics, and they were always moving the goalposts. At first, they were like, "Oh, your sources are wrong," and then when I got into it, they were like, "Oh yeah, I don't believe Starforts are actually from the 1400s. I believe they are from earlier times, but they still use the angles to fight against raiders and arrows and stuff like that. They just changed their argument according to the evidence I put into the conversation. So it's just NPCs, sorry, that are not thinking about what they're saying. They just
Yeah, non-player characters, man.
I'm sorry, I don't know, because they just seem like they don't care about the argument. They just react and change their argument according to what has been proven directly in the conversation.
Have you guys seen the new movie? It is called Us. Have you seen that? Where it's depicted as a black family, African American, and they're away at Summer Lake. Well, why I'm bringing this up is because in that movie, they're fighting against other them. So they're organic portals, like they don't have souls, right? And the people on the surface have souls. But not only that, but they have these tunnels that are connecting to every town in America. And they have these elevators and they have this whole system. And these people are down there in just pretty much schoolrooms or like, labs where they have these bunnies. They're eating the bunny and they're following the white rabbit. But anyways, these beings that are without souls, like these non-player characters that are just like us, or like a doppelganger, are right underneath us in the same towns that we're living in, the cities. So what I'm just bringing up is 2 points that you just made. The NPCs, fighting you, are pretty much just like these non-player characters, and the tunnels underneath us. So I don't know if you guys have seen that, but you really should. It's really cool.
And I should really, I feel like, mention that it's shot in freaking Santa Cruz. So it's also kind of interesting. Jordan Peele made Get Out, made this movie in Santa Cruz, which is really hard to do. Like a lot of people I know try to make movies. I've tried to make movies at the boardwalk. You have to kind of hide it if you do it because they don't want to let people have rights. So it's interesting he was able to make it happen. But I would say another thing, also make sure you see the other Santa Cruz movie, Lost Boys. And there's a friend of mine who's dubbed Us. See if I can find it. David Plate. Sound. He's dubbed the film to. I'll have to find it for you. I'll put a link to it. But I have a friend who's dubbed the movie to another soundtrack because he does like all these. He's one of the most famous sound mixers that mixes videos.
Oh, that's so cool.
And he's found an album that it goes perfectly with. I'll have to ask him which one it is, but I'll put it up because it just did it recently.
Are you guys seeing that there is a Starfort here? Look at the Starfort basket here. This is around the time of Christ. And you can see the leg of mud flood, where it goes up here. It's not here yet, and a lot of the buildings around it has not been built yet. So I think this structure was a lone structure for a long time. There was a lot of civilization going on alongside it in different stages. Like this building was probably like a pyramid in some respect, that it could harbor a civilization in here during a reset, I would think, like an ark. But yeah, here are the Starforts. There's a Starfort castle here. This is a huge building as well. Look, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 stories. And compare with this.
with four, it looks like there's 4 stories underneath it too. So you've got maybe 13 stories.
Wow. This is a crazy view of the temple. It's amazing.
Yeah, it's one of the best ones. And look at these art. These buttresses must be the largest buttresses that has ever been constructed, unless there is another building that we're just not knowing about. This must be like these buttresses. The individual stones here are way larger than that of Baalbek. These stones are way larger than Baalbek. Way larger. Even it's just crazy.
Yeah, pyramidal size, like Coral Castle size. It's insane how big they are. All the stonework gets smaller and smaller through the ages. It's just it's a fact.
Guys, these aren't windows. These are bricked up arches.
Like they're basically like to put like illuminated. I mean, wow, interesting.
And
originally,
they don't even have a statue in them. Maybe there was a statue standing within each of them. But if if everything has a function, what does a bricked up arch like this have as a function, and what does this have as a function? It's so many questions.
Wow.
So is it for like the waters, like to have the waters recede back down?
I would think these are for water. I would think they're for lanterns. Because if you want to have light. Sorry, I'm not sure. Am I able to be heard? Yeah. Okay. There's light reflecting.
You can see.
You put torches in this.
Oh, you're talking about right there. Sorry, I thought you were talking about like the sweep down, kind of look like the skateboard ramp. I didn't know you were talking about.
Yeah, these windows though, it seems like they would be windows, but instead they're bricked off, so maybe they are reflective for light to shine out of, and you have a statue there. And then each spot underneath it has huge steps you can't step up to. There's like, in fact, you can see those steps are higher than the tunnels through the arches that you could actually communicate or move through. You know, so that's pretty crazy. That water is like a moat under these giant river spots. So that shows that there was some sort of a current that was flowing, you know, alternating around the building.
Yeah.
Well, we're about 2 hours in. I was gonna say maybe we should finish this up. Is there anything else you guys wanted to cover?
Maybe I just wanted to maybe perhaps get to show all of the Temple of Solomon here. I'll go quickly. I'll try to. I wanted to get the size here, right? Okay, so these are 300 cubits. And Andreas, can you help me? How much is 1 cubit? I cannot remember.
Oh my gosh, I'm not Rain Man. Let me see. Cubits. Cubits metric. Let's find out.
18 inches and 44 centimeters.
444 millimeters. Range between 444 millimeters and 529.2 millimeters. So between 17 and 20 inches is a cubit. And it is the shorter unit based on the forearm length, tip to tip. So forearm is from here to here. And so this is an interesting metric. They said this is the average metric of a forearm. But even then, it was not, you know, like there's a certain range, they say. But that's an interesting thing that there's 2 different sizes for the cubit. There's the shorter cubit and there's a longer cubit.
I think that it's maybe the longer cubit.
Right. The big old cubit, they call this one, yeah.
Yeah, because this is huge. Like, and comparatively, this is huge. So I don't, maybe it's not too well to use the cubits as a measurement right now because we don't know too much about it.
Well, it's weird though that, no, I mean, so you need to know about the cubit. This is the thing. Like, so Secrets in Plain Sight, I always recommend people watch that if you haven't already. Scott Onstott, Secrets in Plain Sight. But also,
you mean the Royal Mile?
Well, so this is the thing. So when NASA said it took them 3 days to go to the moon, they're like, why? Because the reason is that the rockets could have a certain amount of fuel on them, they said. Well, why? Well, because they had to go on the trains to get to the middle of the country, and the trains had certain sized tracks and tunnels, and the tunnels were proportional to the tracks. Well, why? Well, because the tracks were originally designed to be the same metric length and width of the old Roman chariot roads that they used to use, and the ancient Romans used, and they used the same cubits and metrics to not others to build those train track metrics, the same as the Romans did. Well, why? Why did that happen? Well, because chariots had a certain width. The Caesar had a certain width chariot, because there was both his metric and the chariot builder who built his metric. This is supposed to be like King not Teton or King Tut. There's a myth about it, but it's still a true story. At least we understand it to this day, that there was to be at some point in history a man who measured from his fingertip to his elbow, and that became the official width for the standardization for the cubit, which was used to decide everything from the Roman mile to the American